This program is brought to you in part by SalCal Real Estate Connections.
Welcome to Race in Action Today. We're here today to bring you the action from our favorite race venue, Lime Rock Park, the road racing center of the East. And the event today, and I'll tell you, it's my favorite event of the year. The Lime Rock Historic Vintage Festival is just an outstanding event. It'll feature classic cars, vintage race cars, you name it, it'll be here. I think you better find a comfortable chair and relax. We're about to see what vintage racing's all about and the people who make it happen. Yes, we have Mike Agnifilo with us with this gorgeous Datsun 510, and I'll tell you, these Datsun cars have a real special spot in my heart, and I'll bet you know a little bit about this car, Mike.
I do know a little bit about this car. I've owned it since 1992. Originally a race car, converted back to a street car for a few years. I bought it in 92 as a street car. Came up here and raced it in a vintage Trans Am race, actually with license plates still on it, and then decided to build it back into a race car in 92. I've been racing it ever since.
Yeah, these cars really like this track too. I'm sure you've been here before.
I've been here quite a few times. Actually, I hold the SCCA GT3 lap record here.
No kidding.
In a GT3 car, not in this car, but in another Nissan 240 SX.
Wow. Yeah, this track really likes nimble cars, and that's what Datsun 510s are all about. And I'll tell you, you have a shop too in Connecticut?
I do. Stonebridge Sports and Classics. We specialize in vintage sports cars, restoration, service, repair.
We'll have to look you up because one of my sons got a few of these Datsun 510s, and I'm sure one of these days they're going to find it out in this racetrack.
Well, you know, you can bring it down the shop and we can tune it up for him.
That's I'm sure of. Now, what group you in today?
Group 9. It's, Minis Against the Rest is the name of the group. So it should be interesting out there.
Oh yeah, that's going to be a lively group, I'll tell you.
Yeah, you know, it'll just be very, very lively. Minis are always very lively. So we'll make sure it's a good, clean race. Have fun. That's what it's all about.
Do you go anywhere else in the country?
We go all over. Next weekend we're at Watkins Glen for the SVRA race, which is a Datsun feature race. But yeah, I've gone all over the country with this car.
Now tell me something. What's your favorite racetrack?
You know, I grew up here at Lime Rock. When people ask me how long I've been coming here, I tell them before I was born, because 3 days before I was born, my mom was here watching some races. Wow. So I've grown up here. This Lime Rock's got a special place in my heart.
Oh, I'll tell you, we love this place.
It's fantastic. I love it. Love everything about it.
Well, I'll tell you what, Mike, we're going to keep an eye out on that racetrack, and I got a feeling you're going to really do well and really have some fun here today.
Well, if I have fun, I've accomplished what I came to accomplish.
All right, thanks a lot, and I know this car is going to do well.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mike. You were great. Yes, we have Butch Gilbert with us, who owns this Triumph race car, and I'll tell you, I don't see many of these cars, and I bet you could tell me a little bit about this car.
It's the only one that was built for Trans Am racing back in 1971 by Kaz Kasner for the Triumph factory. They ran a 2.5 series where they ran a bunch of small sedans against each other, Alphas, Triumphs, BMWs, Datsun 510s and stuff, and this was one of the only 6-cylinder cars in the series.
Oh, really? I tell you, I never see this model. What model is it?
It's called a Triumph Vitesse. They were going to import them in the United States, so they built with a 6-cylinder motor in them in England in actually they started making them in '62, and they and they stopped making them in 71 when this car was built, and so they stopped the production and didn't import the cars.
So the car is Trans Am history.
Correct. It ran 4 races in the Trans Am Series in 1971.
Well, you know, one of our favorite sons here, Bob Sharp, used to run in that series, and of course, everyone knows the story about the other Datsun cars.
That's right, and so this qualified next to Sharp, I believe, once on the same row, and unfortunately, they didn't get a lot of development time in the car, and they sold it. And a fellow raced it in SCCA up through '88, and then sold the car, and it went vintage racing, and it's raced every year since 1971.
Wow, that's interesting. Where are you from, Butch?
I'm from Wesley, California.
Wow, this is quite a trip, huh?
I love this track. It's a lot of fun people, a lot of nice race cars, and it's always fun to come someplace and have a lot of fun.
Well, I'll tell you, we're going to keep an eye on this car. I'm very curious. I love sedan racing, especially in the old Trans Am series, and I got a feeling you're going to bring this car around this place.
Oh, thank you very much. It's just great being here.
Thanks for the interview.
Hey,
Thanks a lot, Butch. You were great.
Hey,
He's going to take some pictures of the car.
Okay.
Yes, we have Norman LaTulip with this absolutely beautiful 1966 Corvair, and I bet you know a little bit about this car, Norman.
Yeah, it's a Yanko Stinger. It's part of the kit series that Don Yanko had, where he sold the original 100 or 115, I think, and then he sold kits. And this is one of the kit cars. It's YS306. I completely restored it. It was about a 6-year operation, and we finished it in '06. And I've raced it here in '06. I raced at the Midi in '09 and at this Fall Vintage Festival. So it's been to the Corvair Course National Convention, and it was a 96.7 point concourse car. It's a senior division concourse car. So I try to be real careful with it.
I'll tell you, I have never seen one this well done. And first of all, we never see them to begin with. I mean, they're very rare.
They are a very rare car. I mean, and I have been fooling with Corvairs all my life. I think that was probably the first car I drove when I was in high school was a Corvair. So
is that right? Yes. So you got good experience then.
Well, I think when I graduated from high school, I got a '61 Corvair Monza, and then in '64 I bought a '64 Corvair Spider Turbo Coupe, which I still have. That has 34,000 miles on it. And we used to do some autocrossing, and back in about 1985 I wanted to start racing, so I started racing another Corvair with SCCA and ITA, and I won a couple championships with it. And unfortunately, I rolled it in '95, and I stopped racing, so I started racing again in '03 with a Mazda. While I was working on this, I said, well, if I'm going to race the Corvair, I got to try and stay proficient, so I got to race something else so I get some seat time. And so I do race the Mazda mostly, and I do race this at special events because it is such a nice car. I try to keep the usage down on it.
Yeah, it is certainly pretty. We watched you out on the racetrack, too. You really do great with it out there. And you've been to different parts of the country with it?
With this car, I've been here, and I've been to Road Atlanta in Atlanta, Georgia.
Did you like Road Atlanta?
Oh, it's a lovely track. It's a lovely track. We sort of run, with this car being a true vintage car, we run with drum brakes, and that's our Achilles heel. It's a fairly heavy car to run with drum brakes. And Road Atlanta is a high top speed track. And getting the car wound up is really a challenge.
Now, when you run the drum brakes, are there special metallic lining?
Yes, we use metallic linings. We've tried the best there is, and they're not really cutting it. So General Motors had metallic linings for these back in the '60s, and everybody says those are the absolute best one, but they're almost impossible to find now.
Oh, I see. Well, I have to commend you. This car is absolutely gorgeous, and it looks real good out on the racetrack, and I'll bet you really love driving it.
Oh, starting this last race, I had to start from the back of the field because we got there a little bit late, and I think I 27 or 30 cars in our race, and I ended up 14th. That was the real fun, coming up through the pack.
Yeah, that's when you know things are good.
Yeah, that's a challenge. The adrenaline gets going, and you're trying to get to where you're supposed to be, where you started, because you would have been much better off but we had a little bit of a glitch that we had to try and fix, so we got there a little bit late, but we had fun. It was a ball.
Well, I'll tell you, we had a chance to meet your wife, and I noticed this is probably one of the most sought-after cars here. Everyone that walks by stops and looks at this car.
Well, I think because it's done so well. It's a concourse car. It's a senior division concourse car, and it's the only one here. And we didn't try to skimp on anything we did for this. We always tried to make sure we did the best of what we could do and what we could find, and it makes it a real pretty car. It's impressive to look at.
It certainly is. I'll tell you, we're really want to thank you for having a word with us, and we're going to keep our eye on you all weekend, because I just know you're going to have a good time with this car.
Well, when I used to race in the 80s and early 90s, when I raced with my IT car, I had a son that is now deceased, and we have a mural of him outside the car, and he was my biggest race fan, and I always take him for a ride.
I gotta believe it. He's looking down.
He's on my shoulder, and he's going for a ride.
I have to commend you. That's certainly a great gesture, and I just get that feeling that he's smiling right now.
Wish he was here. Wish he was here.
Thanks a lot, Norm.
You're quite welcome.
We'll be with you out there, too. Okay?
I appreciate it.
Thanks. You were here.
Thank you.
I know it's got to be tough. Yes, we're about to talk to Leonard Q. McHugh about this absolutely gorgeous 1953 Nash Healey. And I got a feeling, Q, you know a little bit about this car.
Yeah, and in the first place, Larry, this is a fascinating car with a fascinating history. Just to tell you a little bit about it, Donald Healey, famous for Austin Healey's, designed this car to replace the Silverstone that was getting a little long in the tooth in England. And he had made an arrangement to buy motors from GM. So he was on a ship this is back 1950, actually late 49. He was on a ship coming over to the U.S. to finalize the deal with GM. And on the way, he met George Mason, who was the president of Nash Kelvinator. You remember the Kelvinator refrigerators?
Absolutely.
Or are you too young?
No, no, I know.
All right. Anyway, when he got to Detroit, GM decided they weren't going to sell him any motors. And the reason for that, of course, was in the late 40s, early 50s, GM was making and selling every car they could produce. So, it was, sorry, but we're not going to be able to provide the motors for you. So he remembered meeting George Mason. So he called George Mason and told him what was going on. And George Mason, remember, they had a Nash, and in the early 50s, as you know, Nash wasn't doing too well. And George thought it would be a great idea to have a sports car on the showroom. It might beef up sales of the regular Nashes. So he agreed to provide a motor, transmission, and a rear end for Donald Healey. Now, the interesting part of these cars is that it's an all-English chassis and running gear. It's right off the old Silverstone. The body was designed by Pininfarina and produced in Turin, Italy, and it has an American drivetrain made by Nash. So it's truly an international car.
No, if memory serves me correct, most of these cars were roadsters, weren't they?
Yeah, most of them were. As a matter of fact, there were only 63 coupes like this. 3 of them were prototypes, and 60 of them were street cars. And a few of them, including this car, were converted into race cars. And of course, the most famous driver who ever competed in a race car in a Nash Healey was John Fitch. And John, a few years ago, gave me the pleasure of signing the car.
Yeah, John's quite a character, I'll tell you.
He is that. He's a terrific guy.
I love to talk to him.
Everybody loves to talk to him, and he loves to talk, too. So we resurrected this car. We found it in St. Louis, and I took my shop manager with me, and his one criteria was it had to have floorboards, because I have a terrible habit of buying these old cars and they don't come with floorboards. So he took one look at it and said, yeah, we can work with that. And it was truly a basket case. It was in very, very bad condition, and my people in 4 months did this car as it looks, and the first time the wheels touched the ground was at the race at the Pittsburgh Grand Prix 5 years ago.
Wow. I mean, I saw pictures of this car. This car needed a lot of work.
Yeah, it really did. It was certainly covered with rust. We believe that it was raced in California, though I've heard people tell me it was raced in the Midwest. So, like any old race car, it certainly wasn't in very good condition. But if you look at it now, it's immaculate. Now, and an interesting thing is that when we restored this car, even though it's a race car, we didn't alter anything from its stock form. And as a matter of fact, the fuel cell in the trunk that's required for safety mounts in the same bolt holes and brackets that the fuel tank would under the car. The seats all go into the regular seat brackets, and we have a full custom interior that matches the original, so I can take the racing seats out, and the car is insured, and it's registered, and we can use it for touring.
Wow. Well, you certainly thought this out pretty good. Now I got to ask you one question. What about Superman?
Ah, yes. In fact, we did a video of this car being done, and our theme is I Am Superman. But Superman, George Reeves, in the TV series, drove a Nash Healey. And if anybody is familiar with Nash Healey, it's usually because of their experience as a child watching Superman programs on early television.
Wow. Isn't that something?
It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah, it's amazing. And I will tell you that there's about 20 people out there who claim to be driving the original Superman car.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure of that. And now tell me, when this car raced in the day, was it a different color?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, this car was red. And the Le Mans cars were a silvery and a greenish color that never really complemented the cars very well.
Yeah, I've seen them a couple of different colors. I was at the Greenwich Concours d'Elegance, and somebody had a silver blue one there that was really gorgeous.
Yeah, but I can tell you it probably wasn't silver blue when it left the factory.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm really impressed how you redone this, redid this car. It's just absolutely beautiful. And I have to commend you, too. I watch you on the racetrack. You really have some fun with this car.
Listen, I have to tell you, no one out there has a bigger smile on their face than I do. I guarantee it. It may not run up front, but I have to tell you that it is the most incredible thing to drive. It's wonderful. It's like racing the Queen Mary, but it's extremely popular. You know, there's multi-million-dollar cars out there competing with it, but I have to tell you that I truly think it's the most popular car on the track. I get lots of great waves from the spectators.
Well, I know. I was telling Bill that I had seen the car on the track. He was telling me about it. He called me up, and I said, I saw the car on the track. It had my attention.
Yeah, it's a pretty car. People really don't know what it is. I've had it called a Bentley and any number of other types of cars. But it's a Nash Healey, very, very unique, not too many of them. And there's a quote in a magazine article about this car that was written after we had restored the car that says that I raced the only Nash Healey on the planet.
I like that. Well, we want to thank you for having a word with us. You've really been great about talking about this car, and we're going to have to take some footage out on the racetrack.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love talking about the car, as you can probably tell. We're really excited about it. We really enjoy it. We're building another motor, make it a little bit more competitive when we're back next year, because it's got a stock motor in it. We didn't do anything to it, and but still, it's such a pleasure to drive out there. It just makes my whole day. And I have a lot of other race cars, but I have to tell you, this is truly my favorite to race. And you can probably tell I'm having a great time if you watch me out there.
And the smile on your face is telling me too. I'll tell you, we seen it out there, and we're going to take some footage of the next time you go out. And we're looking forward to running into you on down the road.
Oh, absolutely. Look for us. We'll be here next year. We were here last year. We're going to do VIR in November, and believe it or not, this car is run at Sebring at least 4 or 5 years. So we will be at Sebring for the big vintage affair that takes place before the start of the 12-hour race.
Yeah, I did see some pictures of this car in a magazine at Sebring.
Yes,
now that I think about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we want to thank you, Leonard. This is just outstanding, and I know you're going to have some fun today.
I am, Larry, and I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about my car.
Absolutely. You were great. Yes, we have Dave Cannon with us with this beautiful XKE 1966. And I bet you know a little bit about this car, Dave.
I've owned this car since 1983. I've vintage raced it since 1984, and I've run Elkhart Lake, Road Atlanta, Mid-Ohio, many different events. It's a fantastic car. It handles very, very well, brakes, goes on a straightaway, and it's an unbelievable joy to drive this car.
Now tell me, did you build this car as a race car, or was it always a race car?
When I bought the car, it was actually an SCCA race car, and I converted it for vintage racing back in '83. It's been a race car since the mid-'70s, but it's gone through a lot of different colors and phases, and I like how it looks now.
Yeah, it is a very pretty car. Now, is this your first time at Lime Rock?
This is my first time here. It's going to be pretty exciting. New tracks have a lot of challenges, and this track is a challenging one.
Now tell me, where are you from?
The car originally was from California, but a team out of Chicago raced it in SCCA, and I'm from Cleveland, Ohio.
So you do some racing in Ohio, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, I race Mid-Ohio. I've done many events there.
They tell me Mid-Ohio is kind of similar to Lime Rock. Is that true? I've never been there.
Yeah, I think you can say that. Mid-Ohio is a longer track, but it has some of the features of this track, and they're both really, really enjoyable, very challenging tracks.
Well, we're going to have to keep an eye out there for you. What group are you in today?
Group 6.
Group 6? Wow. You're with some ground pounders.
That's right, yep.
Well, I want to thank you for the interview, and hope to see you out in the track.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave. You were great.
Thank you.
Yes, we have Joe Freeman with us, a familiar face here up in Lime Rock. And as usual, Joe, you got a fantastic car with you today. Tell me about this number 25.
Well, it's a Curtis Craft 500A Chrysler with a 331 cubic inch Chrysler, about 400 horsepower, 400 foot-pounds of torque. Was an experimental car built by Frank Curtis, who built these cars, along with Herb Porter, a famous Indianapolis mechanic. And Chrysler built this special engine in a program they call the A311 program. They had just come out with a Hemi engine, and they were testing it to see just what it would do. The car was put together and taken to Indianapolis in the fall of 1952, and it set records and was basically very close to what Bill Wojciechowski had done the year before. And Chrysler advertised it, which was good, but they got a lot of publicity. But that didn't work to their disadvantage, because the AAA in control of racing at the time thought that they really were given an unfair advantage, even though they had a rule that had a 334 stock block rule, and this fit the rule. They said, no, that's too big, or you know, it's fuel injected. So they forced the Chrysler to go down to 270 cubic inches, and the cars really didn't work very well then. There were 3 cars entered at Indianapolis. None of them qualified. This was the first alternate. Chrysler decided to just withdraw the cars. This car, basically, Chrysler took the engine back out of it, and it had an offie installed in it. Became the Anstead brothers, or the Anstead Rotary Team car. Paul Russo drove it to 8th in the 1954 500, running as high as 4th. And then it didn't qualify. It was a rookie driver in 55, and Duke Dinsmore drove it to 16th in 56. By that time, the car, which is quite heavy and was basically really outmoded, was basically just rolled into a garage and left. You know, they took the off the engine out because that was. But it's a very original car with all of its body panels and all of the original equipment. And we've put the 331 back in it, with Hillborn fuel injection and roller rockers. And I'll tell you, she really screams. It goes around very well.
Yeah, we've seen you out there, and looks like stepping on the gas could get exciting. And I'll tell you, the history of this car is really something special. I don't know where you find these cars, but boy, I gotta catch your disease.
This one I bought from a very close old friend of mine, sadly passed away, Chuck Davis, who had a just marvelous collection of beautiful Indianapolis cars and Miller racers and things. And he contracted cancer, and I had driven the car for him at Milwaukee on several occasions and really liked the car. And so I just said to him, gee, if you want to sell it, you know, think of me. And so when he was when his cancer was getting pretty much to the terminal stage, he called me up and said, Joe, the car's yours. And so we made a deal, and that was great. And I've had it for about 7 years now, and run it all over the country. I ran it at Monterey, I've run it at Milwaukee, I've run it here in New Hampshire, here at Lime Rock. It's just, and it's a really very good car. It's a little bit of a handful here because of all the right-hand turns. It really was meant to turn left, but it is a straight-up car. So as a result, I could get around here pretty well. I keep up.
Yeah, I was watching you, and I'm anxious. I know you're getting ready to go out for another stint with the car, and believe me, we're going to be watching very closely. I want to thank you for having a word with us, and it's always a pleasure to see you.
Well, it's great to be here. You know, I love it. I like bringing these cars out for the fans to appreciate and enjoy. I usually bring something a little odd, not the normal thing that you see here. But this is a great car, and I'm glad they've had great response for it and so that's neat. I'm really pleased.
You're having fun.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe. You were excellent.
Thanks for watching today, and tune in next week for the next episode of Racing Action Today. This program is brought to you in part by SalCal Real Estate Connections.